Hello, and welcome back to Atomic Blast, the supplemental podcast where we analyze each chapter of Legendary's MonsterVerse. My name is Mark, and you can find me on all social media at Mark Meadows. Today, we will be analyzing and providing commentary for the third chapter of Gareth Edwards' Godzilla. Today's chapter will cover Ford's reconnection with his father Joseph, and the discovery of what Monarch has been up to in Janjira. Chapter 3 will begin in Tokyo, Japan, where Ford arrives to bail his father out of jail. It is the beginning of this chapter where a specific deleted scene took place. When Ford arrives to Japan's Narita airport, the customs agent that he speaks with is played by Akira Takarada, who starred in many Godzilla movies, but more significantly, he played Hideto Ogata in Ishiro Honda's original Godzilla film. This scene was ultimately cut from the final film and still has yet to be released publicly. Explaining the removal of the scene, Gareth Edwards said the following: "From an emotional point of view, in terms of my love of Godzilla, the hardest thing was cutting Akira Takarada. There was a lot of pressure to get on with the adventure and get to the monsters, as soon as you can. So lots of things came out of that part of the movie. And I hung on to that scene with Takarada till the last second. And it was still deemed by the screenings when we tested it that we had to get it shorter. And so that ended up having to go, which is probably my biggest regret."
Dr. Serizawa has proposed the larva is now entering a pupa phase. Our research, therefore, must be conducted swiftly and professionally, as this creature continues to develop at an evolving rate of growth.
Ford takes Joseph home only to discover that Joseph has spent the last decade obsessing over the meltdown in Janjira. Joseph explains that he feels at fault for the death of Ford's mother Sandra, and the decision to send her down into the subcorridor still haunts him. Ford pleads that this grievance has to stop and urges Joseph to come back to the United States with him. In the moment, Joseph reluctantly agrees, and Ford goes to sleep believing that they will return home tomorrow. The novelization details Ford's trouble falling asleep that night. Edwards confirmed that the scene was shot and also added that Ford falls asleep watching Showa-era Toho films. Behind the scenes, Gareth Edwards asked the prop department to create a book written by Dr. Serizawa to be placed visibly on the shelf behind Aaron Taylor Johnson, but accidentally forgot to place it in the scene. Awoken by his father's whispering, Ford realizes that Joseph is planning on trespassing into the quarantine zone once again. Ford tries to object, but Joseph finally confesses that 2 weeks ago, the anomaly he has been studying in Janjira has finally begun talking again. Joseph explains that he needs to return to their home in Janjira to secure the data disks he left there, which would give him a baseline of evidence for his investigation. Although Ford cannot determine if his father is correct or insane, internally Ford comes to terms that this obsession will not end until Joseph can get his answers.
It is of vital importance to this project that the public be kept unaware of the cause of the missing radiation. To both ensure their safety and make certain our agency proceeds without external interference, a quarantine zone will be established, thereby sustaining long-term belief in the danger.
With the aid of an anonymous smuggler, Ford and Joseph sneak their way into the quarantine zone of Janjira. Almost immediately, Joseph notices that his radiation equipment is not working, or that it is working and there is no radiation in Janjira. The two of them also notice a wild pack of dogs run past them, which also supports the notion that the environment is not uninhabitable. With the evidence mounting, Joseph begins to remove his protective helmet, and with a breath of fresh air, confirms that the area is in fact clean of radiation. Ford is stunned by his father's decision, and for a moment questions if he had just assisted his father in returning to Janjira just to end his life with radiation. The opening Q-Zone scene was shot in the Vancouver area at a location called Finn Slough. The concept for our main protagonist adventuring through a ruined city comes from the main production team wanting to show how mankind experiences the aftermath of destruction and not just the destruction itself. Gareth Edwards explained that it's more exciting to show the heroes in a post-apocalyptic world created by giant monsters. I personally really admire the design of this Q-Zone scene. I agree with Edwards in really enjoying the post-apocalyptic imagery, and I think basing Janjira on the prefectures of Tokyo is a great detail for the ruined city's aesthetic. Ford and Joseph locate their home, and Joseph is able to retrieve his data tapes with ease. The interior of the Brody family home is the same set used from the beginning of the film, so the set decorators and paint department had to come together in ruining the set and aging down the furniture. The novelization of the film expands a little more on the family home, showcasing that the nearby Muto is causing the power to fluctuate. I think that's fine for the novelization, but the most important part of the scene remains in the film, which is Joseph Brody finally recovering a photo of Sandra and recognizing the happy birthday banner that Ford made him 15 years ago. Camera A operator Mitch Dubin explains that the moment of the reveal when Joseph sees the banner is an emotional moment because it reminds him of how his life has changed, so you can't be too subtle about it. The novelization details it beautifully, saying that all the emotions Joseph had been fending off snuck up on him, overwhelming him. His elation over finally recovering the data disk gave way to a profound welling of regret. As Joseph reflects on the past, they suddenly hear a helicopter flying overhead, and upon exiting the house, they discover human activity occurring at the power plant. Ford wonders if Japan is currently rebuilding the power plant since there is no radiation leak. Before they can move on, Joseph hears a vehicle approach them, and they are then apprehended by armed security.
Your cooperation in this effort is vital. All travel to and from the site must be approved beforehand with management. With these efforts in place, Monarch now has an opportunity to study the development of the Muto and learn more about its role in nature. Please report to Dr. Graham in the Crow's Nest after this debriefing to receive your assignment. We look forward to working with you, our new member of the Monarch team.
We return to the Janjira power plant in what is personally one of my favorite opening shots of a scene. The mix of the post-apocalyptic imagery, dark red color correction, and musical arrangement from Alexandre Desplat really transport into a completely different world than our own. It's a shot that really reminds me of the 1988 film adaptation of the manga Akira. The shot of the dated Janjira sign also looks similar to how Steven Spielberg designed Jurassic Park post-collapse. When the truck transporting Ford and Joseph arrives at Janjira, Ford remains confined in the vehicle, but Joseph is brought in for questioning. It is here that Joseph finally witnesses the cause of the incident 15 years ago, the male Muto now in its pupa phase. Now this is the first time that we see the Muto, but more specifically, the cocoon of it. Gareth Edwards explains that the cocoon is curved by the attraction to the electromagnetic waves, causing it to bend like iron fillings to a magnet. In the control room of the operation site, Dr. Sarazawa and his Monarch team of specialists observe the male Muto. They notice that the Muto begins to more frequently and more violently generate EMP distortions. One scientist concludes that the progression of the Muto's activity is growing exponentially. Next chapter, we will be discussing more on how Janjira stayed radiation-free despite the collapse, parallels between the Muto's EMP ability and Spielberg's films, and more behind-the-scenes analysis on the creation of the Mutos. And that about does it for today's episode of Atomic Blast. If you have any questions or want to discuss any and all things Godzilla, you can find Atomic Blast on Twitter at Atomic Blast Pod or me personally at Mark Meadows on all social media. And if you've enjoyed everything you've heard today and want to show your appreciation, consider leaving a positive review or tell your friends about the show. With all that said, I hope you check out the next episode, and I will see you then.